I don't know if any of you know who Daily Wire is, but they have what's it called? Well, it's a podcast, but anyways, they did a short film called What is a Woman? And if anyone has had that chance to watch it, I was thoroughly embarrassed. In the streets of New York, he interviewed 3 women just like us and said, can you tell me what a woman is? And being very politically correct, they stood there stammering, could not say anything. And the interviewer said, are you 3 women? Oh, yes, yes. Well, we 3 women know exactly what a woman is, and we're damn proud to be women. And we have no desire to be a man at all. And we are strong, and we're intuitive, and we also know our place. And so all of that being said, we're going to just visit just for a few minutes. Ikano brought up a really great thing in his speech. He talked about trying to make Bitcoin relatable to ranchers who were already very sovereign in their mindset and in their life. A lot of ranchers homeschool. A lot of ranchers live a more traditional life because we're kind of away from city and away from a lot of influence. But if you want a woman to relate to you watching Monday Night Football, tell them something about the quarterback and his wife and their children. Make it personal. And that's what it is for a woman. It's very, very personal. Our number one jobs, not just as women, but as parents, our number one job as parents is to guard the hearts and the minds of our children. It's really important in this day and age that we do not allow our children to idolize Hollywood types, extreme types like that. In fact, someone brought up, it was Will Harris brought up the Disney and the bluebirds. I don't know if any of you really know that a blue jay actually never builds their own nest. They actually take over nests of other birds, kicking robins out and other ones, including the eggs and the birds, and they take over the nest. My husband actually calls them Obama birds, the blue jays. But that is what Disney has done, even with the bluebird on your shoulder. It's just propaganda. And now Disney is ballsy enough to come out and say, I want your children. They have actually come out and said that, and they are fighting hard for our children. And it's time for women like us to stand up and say, you know what, I am a heritage woman, and I know my place, and my place is to guard the hearts and the minds of our children, and to bring that into the home. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that your children are nutritionally sound. When they are nutritionally sound, there will be less gender confusion. And I'll get into that later, and some of you might be going, well, what does that have to do with it? Tye, Micah, Coco, all of us can tell you that nutrition has a whole lot to do with it. If they're consuming a lot of products out of plastic, there's issues there. If they're eating soy that's not fermented, there's issues there. So we'll come back to some of that. But we want to start this in a very logical discord, and that is at birth. And Coco, I got to hear her speak in Crawford, and it was... It moved me so much that I immediately went up to her. I didn't know her at all, and I hugged her, and I'm just like, oh. I mean, I'm beyond childbirth. I don't know if you see me sweating. I am still having hot flashes, so I'm definitely, I've earned all this gray, so I'm up and over that hump. But Coco's story of birthing and her educating us about a doula and a midwife and their role in today's society and her courage to take that step is something I'm just excited for y'all to hear. So Coco, please share your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Will Harris. This is a beautiful farm you have here, and what you're doing here it's radical. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that. We went on the farm tour this morning. If you haven't done that, I definitely recommend it. So on the tour, I was looking for the spark of inspiration that I needed for how I wanted to begin my talk today. And where it was not where I thought I was going to find it. Will was talking about the farm, talking about how he changes where the chickens go. So I'm now a chicken, trying to be a chicken farmer, attempting good husbandry, and having a bit of difficulty if you follow me on Twitter. So I'm in that learning process. But all of a sudden we pass what he called one of his ancestral homes, and his grandson was playing outside. Here
Yeah,
we go.
we're going to cry. So just get ready.
And his eyes lit up and he started yelling, Jack, Jack, Jack Harris. It's just like, yes, there it is. There's the spark, right? That's what we're doing this for, right? That's why we're here. And so thank you for that. That was a beautiful moment. And you have such a beautiful ecosystem that you've created that's teeming with life, as you say. It really is. It's a beautiful thing, energetically also. And so here we go. My home birth journey started with my sister having her two kids before me. And the first birth that she had was with our at a hospital with our cousin who was a doula. And I didn't know, what a doula was at that time. It was, I was 22. We hadn't really been familiar with anybody that had been in the birth process growing up. So it was all very new. My sister trusted an OB to do her birth in the hospital. She said, I want a natural birth. Oh, by the way, I have to thank my mother for giving birth naturally to twins. I'm a twin. And so I have to thank her for birthing me and knowing, within her spirit that she needed to do it naturally. And she didn't know she was having twins. So after my sister came out, they're like, you have another baby in there. And then I was born shortly after. So I was kind of a surprise baby, but that's a really inspirational start to the world, not knowing you're there and then you're there and hi everybody. So my sister did a hospital birth and through her experiences, I gained a lot of knowledge. And it wasn't the birth that she wanted, as a lot of mothers have experienced in the hospital setting. It's very controlled by the doctors, and if you don't have a birth plan set out, it's very easy to be guided in a direction that is the doctor's choosing, which in a lot of ways it tends to be not the outcome that you and your child want, or you and your family want for yourself and your child. So my sister was wanting a natural birth, but the doctor decided that she was going to induce her because it was Christmas. So the doctor was like, why don't we just schedule you in? And didn't really give my sister, what she wanted. And so my sister, left that appointment like, what is she trying to do? Like, I'm supposed to trust this person, so I'm very confused. So the confusion, the fear-based talking points of her doctor really made her extremely upset. And so that was her first birth, and she actually gave birth naturally in the hospital with no induction medication because she stood up for what she wanted. The doctor actually was late for her birth because she was at a Christmas party. So a male physician delivered the baby, which was not what she wanted. She wanted a female doctor, and so all these things that she didn't want happened, and it's kind of like, okay, so that's not what she wanted, and there were ways in which you could have changed the outcome. And so she started diving into natural home birth, and she became a doula. And she became a doula because of her experiences having her first child in a hospital with an OB, and then her second child at home in a water bath. So that was, night and day experiences that I was there for, I was present for. And I saw, the transformation of those two experiences. And I don't know, where we all decided to give, this momentous occasion up to a stranger. But for some reason, along the way we did. And what ends up happening is there's this trauma imprinted, and Slim talks about epigenetics and the energy of these traumatic events that happen in our lives, and the first event being your birth, it being traumatic can affect the rest of your life. So how do we come back and bring back our power? And as a woman, and going through the experiences that I went through via my sister, I was able to see that as a woman, that's giving birth at home is at least something I can do for myself, for my family, to empower myself, to empower my family, to create a beautiful, lasting memory. Now, home births are not always what ends up happening if you have complications. So I want to say that hospitals, they have their place, and they absolutely are crucial and necessary, right? So there's this dichotomy that we're in, that we have this technology, right? And then we also have the tradition, the cultural traditions of thousands and thousands of years of information as it pertains to almost anything, farming, right? Regenerative farming, but also with the birthing process. So with this new movement towards home birth, it's regaining that ancestral knowledge of what it is to give birth at home. And so when I go back and I talk about, well, what happened? It was the turn of the century. John D. Rockefeller monopolized the healthcare industry, then monopolizing the birth industry, and created every woman and their child as a cash cow. Every woman has a price on her head when they walk into the doctor's office. Okay? So when you give birth at home, as long as you're low risk and you don't have, any prior underlying conditions or anything like that, giving birth at home is one of the best things that you can do for yourself and your family. You're at home, you're comfortable. There's no, sterile hospital. I know they're trying to make it better in the hospital, and they're doing a good job. And then the birthing centers too, which is like in between the hospital and the home birth situation. But yeah, I mean, you can surround yourself with the people you want. You can make a little altar light some candles, light some incense, because they don't let you light candles in the hospital. And you can just create it however you want to create it and make it a magical ceremonial experience, right? So I could keep going to you.
That's okay. They're actually giving us a time limit. I mean, limiting women, that's crazy, isn't it? But we are going to go ahead. We all have the gift of gab, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring in, going from the birth. As you know, she's had very successful home birth. And then we're going to go, what happens to the child after that? So we come fast forward to 2020 when COVID exploded all of our lives. And what did they do to our preschool children who need to be touched, who need to not be afraid, who need to be able to breathe? And we're going to let Tye talk about the impacts and the government overreach on our children.
I'd like to thank you guys for being here. This is monumental. This is the tribe, right? These are our people. This is what's going to make a difference, not only in our heritage, but for our children's freedom, and most certainly for our sovereignty. When Anne asked me to join the Women's Heritage panel, I was really excited. Ladies, I want to tell you that your sex is sacred. Men, I want to tell you that your sex is sacred. You were created the exact way that you're supposed to be created to fill the perfect role that you're supposed to fill. And that is to protect, to guide, to nurture, and to create your own sovereignty and freedoms, because they certainly are being snatched from us right now, aren't they? If we do not stand on this hill, which, by the way, I believe is worth dying on, our children will not be sovereign and they will not be free. We are at the door. I believe that the educational system, the medical system, governmental systems that have been in place for so long are abusive. If we do not step out of these systems, we will continue to be abused, and it'll be even worse for our children. I'm going to go into a few statistics. I hope you guys don't mind if I look at my notes. Event 201, October 2019. The Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins, and the World Economic Forum all partnered together to create a simulation for COVID in New York City. They estimated in this simulation that over 700 million people would die. 3 months later, we had COVID. Guys, this is a culling. This is a culling. And we have to know that that is what is happening, not just to us, but to our children. So it's not enough to steal our freedom, but they're trying to steal our health, our children's minds, our bodies, our children's bodies. The level of propaganda is unbelievable. There is no real science to back up the mask mandates or the lockdowns. None. This overreach that the government is graciously promoting into our lives is suffocating, is it not? It's events like this that will help guide the way for us to find our freedom and maintain our sovereignty. Domestic abuse soared over 300% during COVID. All-cause mortality, 700%. That's huge. People are dropping like flies. That also has to do with the vaccination. Children's cognitive learning, the ability to read people's expressions, their faces, what they mean when they say something, the need to be touched, the ability to be loved and hugged and touched was stripped from our children during COVID. Children's developmental abilities were delayed by 2 years. And guess what? The CDC moved those guidelines so that it would match where children are now. It's a lie. They are stealing life from us and stealing life from our children. I'm not here necessarily to preach to the choir, but I'm here to charge you, to encourage you, and to say that the buck stops here. It must. It has to. Not only did domestic abuse soar through the roof by over 300%, children's suicide rates are up 4 times higher than they were before COVID. And I'm not talking about 14 and 15-year-olds. I'm talking about 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds. The rates of children between the ages of 10 and 12 committing suicide right now are so high that we are having an epidemic. They are ingesting chemicals to kill themselves because life is too hard for these babies. That's what we're facing. Depression. Children that are 12 years old are taking antidepressants, and the rate of that is 41% higher than it was before COVID. If we couldn't cope, how can they? It is our job to not only be sovereign, but to oversee our children so that they can be sovereign and they can govern and steward their mind, their health, the ability to have healthy relationships, and the ability to steward their life in a free manner. I just want to encourage you guys to be thoughtful with your children, to be engaged in their health, feed them God food, not man food. I see so many parents who will eat healthy and take all the right supplements, but then they feed their kids sugar because they don't want to hear it. What are we thinking? What are we thinking? If we're going to steward our health, and not steward theirs, what are they left to do? They're left to fend for themselves. And we're seeing an entire society of people who are allowing schools to raise our children. And I wrote something down that I do feel like is important. And I just want to ask you guys, do you want your kids to remain in a system that is degenerate? Because that's what we're looking at with the school education. They're teaching our children to cut off their sex organs. They're teaching them to say that they can be something other than what our Creator created them to be. No, this is the hill, and the buck stops here. These are our children, and it's up to us to steward their walk and their health, but also steward ourselves appropriately so that we can manage our parenting with our children. So if we were upset during this time of COVID, what did they see? And their bodies are so tiny that they can't even contain the emotions. And we expect these little tiny humans to bounce back, don't we? Be gracious, thoughtful with our children, but let's steward ourselves appropriately. Let's steward our children appropriately. Let's steward our health appropriately. If you guys don't know, ask questions. If we don't know, we're going to ask questions. We are here to glean from you. We want you to glean from us as well, because this has been our experience in the wellness consulting business that we have. The buck stops here, and this is the hill.
So after preschool and after young elementary, our kids do get into that difficult age where hormones start raging. And we as parents tend to think we need to give them more freedom, allow them to have more time away so they can become independent. But as you give them that freedom away, if you're not filling the time with them, you have to ask yourself who is filling that time. And so Weldon and I actually homeschooled our 4 kids. And it was right before 9/11, we brought 2 of the 4 home because my adopted son in kindergarten, he's the kind that would just give you the shirt off his back. And he was, in our experience, parenting the 4 kids, my youngest son was the troublemaker, but my older son always got caught. So he always took the brunt. You know, you turn around, who's doing it? And you'd only see him. JR, stop that. You know, so in kindergarten, I had a good friend who was the room mother. And she said, you know, JR's having to sign the bad behavior book every single day, and it's not his fault. He's never, the one who's in trouble is never getting caught. So I had a conference with the teacher, and the teacher tells me that my son is ADHD and he needs to be put on Ritalin. I'm already of the mindset, we weren't ranchers, but God blessed me to be already of a mindset to be holistic and natural. We already brought a lot of our food at home, didn't eat out a ton. Definitely standard American food, but we still were a bit more holistic than not. And I'm like, no, I'm not putting my 5-year-old son on Ritalin. Of my 4 children, he is the least distractible. When he's at a task, he stays at task and finishes task. So I didn't understand what she was trying to communicate. Kindergarten ends, and they say he's too old to go into D1, but he's not good enough to go into first grade. I'm like, what is going on? So as a woman, I prayed. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do here? So I took my strongest child, who was beyond her grade in academics, and I took my weakest child, and I brought those 2 home and started to homeschool. And it was something my sister-in-law was already doing, so I had a little bit of a community. I didn't really know what I was doing. There's so many resources out there. Don't feel like you can't do this. Don't feel like you are not qualified because you don't have a teaching degree. Because you are qualified, God gave you that child, therefore you're qualified to be the one who is to influence them and educate them. There's all kinds of homeschooling. There's Book in a Box. You can call, and you can, when my kids got into high school, I did more of that, where they sent their papers into someone else to be graded, and the papers came back. To being where I know there's a young woman, Mills, she works for Bitcoin Magazine. I don't know how many of you know her. She herself is homeschooled. She actually, as a young woman, she's probably just in her mid-20s, and she has already homeschooled because her brother and wife had a health issue and couldn't continue to homeschool their kids, so she stepped in and homeschooled those 2 kids, and did extremely well. And if you've ever met her, she's drop dead gorgeous. She's an extremely accomplished young woman, and people say, don't homeschool kids turn out weird. No. Look at Mills. If you met my 4 children, they're completely different. I have a horse whisperer as my oldest child. I have an executive at TikTok. I have a stay-at-home dad with 4 children. Yes, they had kids too young, so it's crazy. But and then I have a young man who is discerning his vocation in religious life, possibly while he's working for Holy Cow Beef. So very, very different for children. 2 of them got full ride scholarships to Texas Tech University. And when I say full ride, my daughter was actually paid for her books, her boarding, and money extra to go home to us. We lived in the Graham Possum Kingdom area. Those who are from Texas know where that is, just south of Wichita Falls. But anyways, that's the kind of full ride scholarships. Because when you bring kids home into school to educate them, you're going to find that you don't need 7 hours to educate them. You don't, especially the little ones. I mean, Coco, you're doing little ones right now. It's about an hour. It's about an hour. And that is educating. That's not unschooling. That's actually still giving them papers to trace the ABCs and to learn how to read and to learn how to do math. That's still educating them. You can do that in about an hour. That gives you 6 hours not to teach them to stand in line, not to teach them that they should be afraid of their neighbor, not to teach them to pick their mask off the bathroom floor and put it back on. So that's not what those 6 hours are for. If you knew our daughter that is the high-powered executive, you would know that what makes her relaxing and more centered is she's an amazing baker. So if she wasn't so driven in the corporate world, she would open a cupcake shop. And why? Because during those 6 extra hours of our day, she baked and she cooked. Some practical things, if you're thinking, I don't know how I'm going to be able to manage my time, your kids are little people. They're not invalids. In our home, those 4 kids each had to take a dinner a week. And they had to menu plan, and they were given a budget. And they had to come in, and it had to be a balanced meal according to what I thought was balanced at that time. And that took 4 meals off my back. I didn't have to think about creating 4 meals for my family. A lot of times I loved Harry talking about cooking once a week. Put that roast in the crock pot or in the oven, get 4 pounds of meat out, and eat off it all week. Do smart things like that. And if that's not your gift, if you really still struggle with the idea of schooling your own children, find a community. We are a community. There is someone that's going to step up and say, I can take your kids if you'll cook 2 meals a week for me. Value for value. You can do this, women. We are strong. And we know we're strong. And so you need to be encouraged. And you need to understand how strong our maternal instinct is. It is when I see women who are nutritionally balanced, and there's several here and that I've had the chance to visit with personally, they're not married, they don't have children, and their maternal instinct is just oozing out of them. We all have children. We're seasoned. We're speaking with a voice of experience. But these other women are so hungry. They are so like, when I have my children, I want this. They are so grounded in being a woman. They already know that they don't desire to be a man. And if you're a single woman, you're like, I'm a single woman and I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. Again, find that community and then trade. Maybe you could babysit the kids in exchange for them being homeschooled. These are real situations. You might think I'm making up this stuff, but I've seen it. I've experienced it. That homeschool mom who has taken in a couple extra kids to homeschool would love a night off and have a date night with her husband. Babysit those kids, make some extra meals, figure out a way for value to value. I've had people in my business when we were advertising these summits, what does that mean? I said, well, as a simple example, I'm not the best baker and my daughter lives in Austin. We live in Lubbock. And so I don't know if y'all know this, but as much as meat has been demonized, so has bread. And if you grind your own grains, then you have the bran and the germ in your bread. And that's where the real nutrition is. That's when it becomes a complete protein. But it also goes rancid in 7 days. And so the bread in the stores are always, regardless of the labels are very misleading. The bread in the stores are always without bran and germ because they cannot mass produce bran and germ. It goes rancid. So, but when you bring that home, so I have been in giving up bread because it was demonized for a while before I learned all this information. Look up Sue Becker. She's got a great podcast on the holistic consumption of bread. I had been missing hamburger buns. We eat hamburgers a lot, and we're beef people. We eat hamburgers a lot. We ate hamburgers today. So I have a friend that she loves when my son smokes prime rib or New York strip or even just beef roast. So we'll smoke it, we'll slice it thin for her, and she gives me 12 hamburger buns that I put in my freezer, and that's value for value. So that's simple. But as women, oh my goodness, it makes our life much easier. So in just kind of wrapping up, and we want to open this up for questions, I wanted to share, there's a funny sitcom, where is he? Or a romantic comedy. It's called Al McGuire, what's it called? Jerry Maguire. And Tom Cruise, at the very end of the movie, is going to get the girl, and he walks in and he says, hello. And then he starts in this litany of why he wants the girl. And she says, you had me with hello. And I remember when I finally sat down with Slim many months ago, I'm like, okay, I don't understand. What is this for? And he just went, it's for the children. I'm trying to save the children. And he had me. And he had every female heart in this room. And he had Will Harris's heart. Every parent, when you start saying we're trying to save the children, you got us. And we have to stand strong, but we have to come in community. There's stuff, Econo knows so much stuff I can't even fathom, but I need his knowledge. I have stuff that they need. We all are here because you've been called here and you responded. I mean, we're in the middle of Georgia. I mean, how did we get here, right? But I've been here before, and it's so worth it, and I'll come here again and again. And this man is special, Will Harris, and we're eternally grateful that you let us and our tribe come and be on your ranch. So thank you. Do we have time for questions? Are we done? Okay, are there any questions? Even just practicality questions? Yes, ma'am. That's so funny. Okay, I've had people, when we were homeschooling, come up and say, you homeschool? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, you don't look like homeschoolers. I'm like, what do homeschoolers look like? And so honestly, in this day and age, homeschooling is super easy. Go into Mardell's. They've got curriculum in a box. Mill's mother just said, hey, what do you like? She said, I like American Girls. So she built a curriculum around American Girls. You can build curriculum so easily around so many different things. And the society norms now are so much more accepting than they were back in the day. And I don't want it to become vogue because a lot of people are into this unschooling. I understand it. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think you still need to teach the ABCs, how to read and do math. And then you can find where your child excels. And that's the unschooling part, and that's the beauty part of it. But don't forget, we still need them to read and be functioning members of society. So I don't feel like I have a lot of society issues with it.
You just have to trust your gut and just say, fuck it. And it's amazing what happens when you actually do that.
When you bring it back home, when you take control. Yep. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, that's fair. Right. So you need to tell them, okay, I haven't shared a couple really cool practical things because I'm under the gun on time. But one thing, my sister had a baby that got very sick and had multiple strokes. So I loaded my 4 kids up to drive from Texas to Michigan to visit. This is what family does. If they were in school, I couldn't have really done that. But we said, here's a budget. We put it on paper. This is what it's going to cost. You each 4, there's 5 of us going, all 4 of them. We divided the trip into 5, and they had to manage their money going there and coming back. And so when we go to a restaurant, they knew they had their budget. I made them have little notepads, and they wrote it all down. And 2 of them are not good with money management, and 2 of them are misers, and they would eat the cheapest thing on the menu. So by the time we were en route back home, It was literally our last meal out, and we stopped at Cracker Barrel. 2 of them didn't have any money left. And so the fair thing to do was to hold tight to what we set, that standard. So they had to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich, eat it in the car. That was back in the day when you really could leave your kids in the car. So the two misers and myself went in and sat down and ordered full-size meals because we still had money in our budget. And the 2 that had to eat the measly little peanut butter and jelly came in and joined us. And when they sat down and joined us and the meals were served, the 2 misers shared their meals. And it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And the 2 that didn't have any money felt so amazed. So we ended this on such a great learning note, but we ended with just this really positive thing. And so my kids never felt like, oh, we're weird because we're homeschooled. They felt like, wow, I got to take a cross-country trip and do this. But as a parent, you have to keep reminding them that. You have to keep saying, you know, if you weren't homeschooled, we wouldn't get to go to swimming at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We wouldn't get to do these various things. So like build a resume that will end up getting you that full ride scholarship to college. So,
and guys, there's always a way. There's always a way. My granddaughter was born a month premature. She had some really severe learning deficits, and she went through the 1st grade, and she couldn't read, she couldn't write, and she couldn't do math. And her teacher would say the most degrading things to her. You're drowning. You're drowning. She thought a literal flood was going to come into the school and drown all the children. We have to be careful what we say, right? So my mom took her out of public school, and then she started to homeschool her. That little girl is 10 years old now, and she's smarter than her 13-year-old sister, who was educated in the public school system. And Micah teaches her biology. And I pick up the slack from my mom when she needs it. There's always a way. There's always a way.
Yeah, you might not be able to see the path in front of you, but just start taking the steps. You know, see what ignites a little bit of fire within you and go there. Go wherever that is. And the path will appear.
we often say walk by faith and not by sight. Just you're feeling the call now. The seed has been planted. Slim is always talking about the seed. In fact, I actually have a little bit of scripture. But as for the seed that fell on rich soil, which is what we have here, which is what Will is and his entire ranch is, for the seed that fell on rich soil, they are the ones who, when they have heard the word, embrace it with a generous, good heart and bear fruit through perseverance. We are called to bear fruit. We are empowered with each other as a community to persevere and to do that. So don't be shy. Don't be embarrassed to ask any question. Reach out to the three of us. We're opening up. You can reach Coco on Twitter. You can reach me. I'm old school, so I'm a texter still. You can reach me on texting. How do you want them to reach you?
There's cards on every table. You guys can call
Or email. And it can be something simple like, I don't even know how to get started, or what should I make for dinner tonight? Really, don't be shy, because there's women out there that have a lot of knowledge to share.
We're building a community, and everyone in here is now part of that family.
We are the tribe, and there are no wrong questions.